That door won't lock. Someone could walk right in.
You're new. You see threats everywhere. Relax.
Dahlia...
I know you're in here.
Nobody calls anybody. Nobody plays hero tonight.
They're not coming. It's just me. Garrett, I'm not gonna touch you.
Who are you? Stay back.
Your hands are shaking. You're sick. I've seen this. Sick men can put a thing down. Cruel men can't. Which one are you, Garrett?
The door to the locked maternity ward was never meant to open from the outside without a badge. It was steel cord, alarmed, the kind of door that meant safe. At 3 in the morning it came open anyway, wrenched from its magnetic seal, with a sound like a bone giving way. And the alarm that should have brought the whole floor running only wailed into an empty corridor where no one answered it. Down that corridor a man's voice carried, low and shaking and sure of itself. "Nobody plays hero tonight," Garrett Nolan said, and the fire extinguisher in his hands caught the light. 6 nurses on that ward, 2 doctors, 1 young mother who had begged to be hidden. And the quietest person in the building, the one who never raised her voice, was the last one anyone thought to worry about. Her name was Simone Adeyemi, and she had been at Saint Alder Regional for exactly 5 weeks. 5 weeks is nothing in a hospital. 5 weeks is still the new girl. It is still learning which supply cabinet sticks, still forgetting where they keep the extra blanket warmers, still being introduced to the day shift like a stranger every single morning. 5 weeks means your locker still smells like someone else's perfume, and your name on the schedule is printed a little smaller than everyone else's, as if the ink itself is not yet sure you will stay. Simone did not mind being new. She minded being noticed, and lately she had been noticed. It started with the codes. In her 2nd week, a man came up from the emergency department in cardiac arrest, and while the veteran nurses shouted and the crash cart rattled and somebody's hands were trembling too hard to draw up the medication, Simone had simply stepped in. She did not run. She did not raise her voice. She counted compressions in a flat, even murmur, called for the drugs by dose without being asked twice. And when the rhythm came back on the monitor, she stepped away and let the code leader take the credit like it was nothing at all, like she had done it 100 times before. She had done it more than 100 times before. But nobody at Saint Alder knew that. The older nurses noticed. Of course they noticed. Marge Halloran, who had worked that floor for 26 years and had buried 2 husbands and a son, watched Simone the way you watch weather coming in off the water. "You don't scare," Marge said to her one night, not a question. "I scare," Simone said. "I just do it later." That was the closest she ever came to telling the truth. Because the truth was folded up small and put away, the way you put away things that do you no good to look at. Simone Adeyemi had been an army combat medic, 3 deployments, and she had knelt in dust and worse than dust, with a boy's life slipping away between her hands, had learned that panic is a luxury you cannot afford when everyone else in the truck is looking at you to decide whether they live. She had a citation for it, a real one, signed, the kind they read aloud while people stand at attention. It had come home with her in a cardboard tube, and it lived now at the bottom of a drawer in her apartment in Cape Merrow, face down, unframed. Because every time she thought about hanging it on a wall, she remembered what it had cost to earn it, and she put it back. She did not want to be the calm one. She had spent 3 years being the calm one, and calm had a price, and she had paid it, and finally come home to be ordinary. That was the whole plan. A quiet ward, a night shift, a job where the worst thing that happened was a difficult delivery, and where she could be a person again and not a pair of steady hands. That was the plan. The young mother came up from the emergency department a little after midnight, admitted overnight for observation, and her chart had a flag on it, a colored tab, a small quiet mark that meant more than it looked like. Protective status. In the fields where the family history went, someone had typed 2 words and left everything else blank. No contact. There was an ex-husband. That was all the chart would say. no contact, and a woman who flinched when the elevator dinged, and a baby, not yet a day old, sleeping down the hall in the nursery behind glass. Her name was Delia. She was maybe 23, and she held her own hospital gown closed at the throat, with a fist even lying down, and when Simone came in to take her blood pressure, the girl watched the door instead of the cuff. "You're safe here," Simone told her. It was the kind of thing you said. She almost believed it herself. "He always finds where I am," Delia said. "He's got a way. He knows people." Her eyes went to the window, to the black glass and the harbor lights beyond it. "You'll think I'm making it up." "I don't think that," Simone said, and she meant it, and she felt something old and unwelcome stir in the back of her mind. Some instinct she had been trying to let go rusty. She looked at the girl's flinch and the fist at her collar and the way she counted the exits without knowing she was doing it, and Simone recognized all of it, because she had lived inside a body that did the same. Fear that has learned to be quiet. Fear that has been right before. She stayed a few minutes longer than she needed to. She smoothed the blanket. She turned the light down. On her way out, she noticed the newborn nursery across the hall, the row of clear bassinets under soft lamps, one of them holding Delia's daughter, 6 feet from the corridor, 6 feet from a door that a badge was supposed to keep shut. That door was the thing she had complained about. 2 weeks earlier, Simone had gone to the administrator, Curtis Vane, in his office with the good carpet, and she had told him plainly that the ward's badge access system was failing. She had seen the maternity door held open with a wedge more than once. She had watched a delivery man walk straight through behind a nurse without scanning anything at all. She had timed how long the door sat unlatched after the maglock released. And it was long. It was too long. A full breath and then some. Long enough for a person to slip in behind you before it ever sealed. "On a locked ward," she said. "On a ward where we keep flagged patients. That is not a small thing." Curtis Vane had a way of smiling that never reached higher than his mouth. He had thanked her for her diligence. He had used the word diligence the way you use it on someone you have already decided not to listen to. And then, because he thought she had left, she heard him say it to the woman at the next desk. "The new one's a little paranoid," he said. "Comes in seeing threats everywhere. They get like that." They. As if he knew what she was. As if he had the first idea. She had gone home that night and stood in front of the drawer where the citation lay face down, and she had not opened it. She had just stood there, turning that word over. Paranoid was what people called someone who had been to the places where the danger was real and had come back unable to unsee it. She let it go. She was trying to be ordinary, and ordinary people did not push. So she did not push. She let the door stay broken. She would think about that later. She would think about it for a long time. The night of it began soft. That was the cruelty of it, how soft it began. There was a light fog off the harbor, the kind that made halos around the parking lot lamps. The ward was quiet. Dr. Priya Raman, the overnight obstetrician, was charting at the station with a cup of tea gone cold at her elbow, complaining mildly about a resident who never restocked anything. Marge was on her break. Down the hall, a monitor beeped its patient rhythm, steady and sleepy. Delia had finally fallen asleep with the light off. In the nursery, the babies slept in their row, and the night nurse there hummed something under her breath. Simone was in the medication room when the door came open. She heard it before she understood it. The maglock did not click the way it should. Instead, there was that wrench of metal, that wrong sound, and then the alarm, and then the alarm going on and on into a silence that should have been footsteps and was not. She stood very still with a syringe half drawn in her hand, and she listened, and the part of her she had been putting to sleep for 2 years woke all the way up in a single cold instant, the way it always had, the way she hated that it could. 2 sets of footsteps, not 1, 2, and a voice. "Delia!" the voice called, and it was not calling the way a worried man calls. It was calling the way a hunter calls, loud enough to flush the quarry out of hiding. "Delia, honey, I know you're here. I just want to talk, that's all, just talk." Through the reinforced window of the medication room, that little square of wired glass, Simone watched Garrett Nolan come onto her ward. He was a big man gone hollow. That was the first thing she saw, before anything else. Before the extinguisher he had torn off the wall bracket by the entrance. Before the second man trailing a step behind him with his hands jammed in his jacket. She saw the hollowness. Garrett's face was slicked with sweat that had nothing to do with the temperature. His pupils were blown wide and black. His jaw worked at nothing, grinding, and his free hand shook with a fine, constant tremor that he kept trying to still against his thigh. He walked like a man walking on a floor that was tilting under him. She had seen men come apart like this before, in field tents, in the backs of trucks, men whose bodies were screaming for something that was not there. Withdrawal, deep in it. Hours past his last dose, and climbing into the bad part of the curve, where the sweats and the shakes turn into something meaner, where the light hurts and the skin crawls, and a man will do almost anything to make it stop, or to stop feeling it. She catalogued him the way she had been trained to, and hated that she still could. The extinguisher was heavy in his grip. He was not steady enough to swing it well, but he did not need to swing it well. He needed to swing it once, and there were newborns down that hall. The second man was different, younger, wired, glancing over his shoulder at the propped door, not committed, a follower, brought along for numbers, not conviction. His hands stayed in his jacket, but they never came out with anything, and Simone marked that too. One true threat and one uncertain one. That was the math of the room, and she did the math without deciding to, and then she stood in the dark of the medication room with her heart going hard and level, and she thought, clearly, in words, I am not doing this again. Dr. Rahman had risen at the station with the phone in her hand, and Garrett saw her, and he pointed the nozzle of the extinguisher at her like a weapon. Put it down, he said. Put it down or I start breaking things. Nobody calls anybody. Nobody plays hero tonight. He was crying and did not seem to know it. I just want my wife. There's no one here by that name, Priya said, which was brave and was a lie, and he knew it was a lie, and the knowing pushed him another notch toward the edge. Simone watched Delia's door. It was closed. The girl was behind it, awake now surely, listening to the voice she had spent her whole flight from a marriage trying not to hear again. And across from that door was the nursery, the glass, the row of small sleeping lives, and Delia's daughter nearest the corridor, 6 feet from where Garrett Nolan stood shaking with a steel cylinder in his hands. The night nurse in the nursery had frozen. Simone could see her through the glass, one hand pressed flat to her own mouth, her whole body locked. Marge was somewhere on break, behind a door, out of it. Priya was buying seconds with words and running out of them. Nobody was coming. The alarm had been ringing for a full minute and nobody was coming, because the badge system that Curtis Vane had called her paranoid about had let 2 men onto a locked ward, and there was no cavalry. There was no code team for this. There was just what happened to be standing in the room. What happened to be standing in the room was her. She looked at her own reflection faintly in the wired glass. New girl, 5th week. The quiet one who scared later. And she understood, with a kind of grief, that later had arrived. That ordinary had been a thing she was allowed to borrow, and not a thing she got to keep. She could stay in the medication room. The door locked. She could crouch under the counter and be a survivor and let it play out and tell herself she had no choice. She thought of Delia's fist at her collar and the girl saying he always finds where I am, and 6 feet of tile between a shaking man and a sleeping child. If you have ever had to become someone you were trying to leave behind, you know the particular quiet of that decision. It is not brave, not the way people mean it. It is just a door closing softly on the person you hope to be, and the old person stepping forward, because the old person is the one who knows how. Simone set the half-drawn syringe down on the counter. She reached up and pulled the tie out of her hair and gathered it back and bound it tight and clean off her face, the way you do when you are about to work and cannot have anything in the way. She rolled her sleeves, first one and then the other, past the elbow, folding the fabric into flat cuffs with a soldier's automatic neatness. She looked at her own bare forearms, at the old scar on the left one she never explained to anyone. She breathed out, long and slow, and let her heart rate come down the way she had trained it to, down and down until her hands were still. Then she opened the medication room door and walked out into the corridor, unhurried, empty-handed, into the line of sight of a shaking man with a weapon. "Garrett," she said. He spun toward her. The extinguisher came up. "Who are you? Don't come near me." "I'm not coming near you," Simone said, and she stopped where she was, well back, hands loose and open and visible at her sides. Her voice was low and even and carried without rising, the flat, calm murmur the older nurses had learned to listen for. "I'm just going to stand right here, that's all. I'm going to stand here and talk to you, and I'm not going to touch you, all right? Nobody's going to touch you. You don't know anything about me. I know your hands are shaking," she said. "I know your skin feels like it's crawling right now, like there's something under it you can't scratch. I know the lights are too bright, and every sound is like a nail. I know you're sweating and freezing at the same time. I know you're sick, Garrett. I know exactly how sick you are, because I've seen it, and I know it started climbing about 2 hours ago, and it's going to keep climbing." She held his eyes. "You didn't come here because you're strong tonight. You came here because you couldn't stand to be alone with how bad you feel. Isn't that closer to the truth?" Something crossed his ruined face. He had come in loud, come in swinging his voice around the ward like the extinguisher, come in as the biggest man in the room. And this small, quiet woman had looked at him for 10 seconds and named the thing he had been hiding under, all of it. The sickness, the shaking, the need. Named it plainly, without disgust, the way you name a fact. "Shut up," he said, but the extinguisher had dropped an inch. The second man, the young one, shifted by the door. "Garrett, man, maybe we should—" "Shut up," Garrett said to him too, but there was no force in it now, only exhaustion. Simone kept her eyes on Garrett. She did not look at the nursery. She did not look at Delia's door. She made herself the only thing in the room, made her low, steady voice the whole world. Because that is what you do. That is the entire trick of it. You become the still point, and you pull the frightened animal toward you, a breath at a time. "How long since your last dose?" she said. Not a demand, a nurse's question. Gentle. His mouth twisted. For a second he was not going to answer. Then, because someone had finally asked him the true question instead of the frightened ones, he said, hoarsely, "This morning. Early." "That's a long time to feel this bad," she said. "You must be exhausted. Fighting it this whole time." She let a beat pass. "You're not going to feel any better in here, Garrett. You know that. Whatever you thought would fix it, it isn't in this hallway. She isn't going to fix it. This baby isn't going to fix it. The only thing in this building that can help how you feel right now is me, and I can't help you while you're holding that." His eyes went, just for an instant, to the nursery glass, to the small shapes in the bassinets, the nearest one. His daughter, if she was his, and Simone did not know, and it did not matter, because she watched his gaze land there, and she watched something behind his eyes recoil from himself. "I wasn't going to," he started, and stopped, and his voice cracked all the way down the middle. "I wasn't going to hurt a baby. I'm not that." "I know you're not," Simone said, though she knew no such thing, though she was ready for the other thing, though under her stillness every muscle was mapped and waiting. "I can see you're not. That's why I came out here. Because I looked at you and I thought, that's a man who's sick, not a man who's cruel. Sick men can put a thing down. Cruel men can't. Which one are you, Garrett?" The corridor was so quiet she could hear the fog against the window. Garrett Nolan looked down at the fire extinguisher as if he had forgotten he was holding it. His arms were trembling so badly now that the metal shivered against itself with a faint ringing sound. He was crying openly, silently, the tears running into the sweat on his face. And he looked back up at the quiet woman with her hair tied back and her sleeves rolled, standing there, without a weapon, without fear that he could see, and he did not understand her, and something in not understanding her broke the last of his momentum. "If I put it down," he said, and it came out like a child, "what happens to me?" "You sit down against that wall," Simone said, "and I take care of you. Your body is in withdrawal, and that is a medical thing, and I treat medical things. That's my whole job. Nobody hits you, nobody yells at you. You're the sickest person on my ward right now, Garrett, and that means you're mine to look after. Put it down and sit down and let me do my job." For a long, long moment, nobody in that corridor breathed. Then Garrett Nolan bent at the knees, slowly, and set the fire extinguisher on the floor, and it rolled a little way and stopped against the base of the wall. He slid down the wall himself until he was sitting on the tile with his knees up and his shaking hands hanging off them, and he put his head back and closed his streaming eyes, and the biggest man in the room was suddenly the smallest, just a sick person on a floor, undone. Simone did not rush him. That was the thing that later nobody could quite believe. The ones who watched the footage back. She did not pounce. She crossed to him at a walk, slow, talking the whole way in that low murmur, telling him what she was going to do before she did it. "I'm going to sit down next to you now. I'm going to check your pulse. My hand's going to be on your wrist, that's all. All right, here it comes." She knelt. She took his wrist in her fingers, the way she'd taken Delia's blood pressure hours before, and she counted, and his pulse was racing and thready, and his skin was cold and damp, exactly as she'd known it would be. He let her. He let her because she had told him the truth about himself when everyone else was lying, and there is a strange trust that opens up in a person when someone finally sees them plainly. The young man by the door had not moved. Simone lifted her eyes to him without letting go of Garrett's wrist. "You," she said, gently, the same voice. "What's your name?" "Dev," he said. "Dev, are you sick too?" "No, no." "Then you're the one who gets to walk out of tonight the easy way," she said. "Take your hands out of your jacket. Slow. Show me they're empty." He did. They were empty. She had thought they would be. Good. Now you go stand by that station, over there, where the doctor is, and you put your hands flat on the counter, and you wait. And when this is over, you get to say you didn't do anything but stand there. That's the whole difference, Dev, between how tonight ends for you and how it ends for him. You want that difference. Go stand by the counter. And Dev, who had never wanted any of this, who had been drawn into a bad thing by a bigger man's need, went and stood by the counter and put his flat hands down and started, quietly, to cry too. 2 hostels, both down, neither with a mark on them, and she had not so much as raised her voice. Let me stop here for one breath, because a moment like that is the whole reason I sit down to tell these stories at all. If it's holding you the way it holds me, take 1 second and subscribe, so the next one finds you too. That's all I'll ask. Now let me tell you what happened when the lights came up. She looked up at Priya Raman, who was standing frozen with the phone still in her hand, staring at Simone as though a stranger had been living inside the new night nurse all along. "Priya," Simone said, and it was the first time she'd used the doctor's first name, and it landed like a hand on the shoulder. "Call it in now. Police and an ambulance. We have a man in acute withdrawal, and tell them the scene is contained. Contained. Say that word so they don't come in hot." Priya nodded and dialed, her hands shaking where Simone's did not. Garrett had begun to shiver harder, his whole body racked, and Simone knew that letting go of him now would be a mistake, that a man this deep could turn frightened and thrash without meaning to, and hurt himself or her. She needed him secured, and she needed it done kindly, and she needed it done with what was in reach. There was a supply cart against the wall where a nurse had abandoned it. She reached out one arm without leaving his side and pulled it close and found what she needed. A roll of soft gauze, the wide kind, and coiled beside it the elastic strap off a fetal monitor, the belt they cinch around a mother's belly to listen to a baby's heart. She had held that same strap warm from Delia's own middle hours ago. Now she uncoiled it in her lap. "Garrett," she said, "I'm going to keep your hands still so you don't hurt yourself while we wait for the medics. It won't be tight and it won't hurt. It's just soft gauze. Feel it." She pressed the roll against his palm and it was soft as surrender, and he did not pull away. "And this strap here, I'm doing it so nobody has to grab you rough when the police come. I'm doing it so it stays gentle. Do you understand me?" "Yeah," he whispered. She wound the gauze around his wrists, crossed and figurated the way you'd secure a splint, snug but padded, nothing that would bruise, and she cinched the fetal monitor strap over it and fastened it, and she settled his bound hands in his lap, and put her own hand over them for a moment. Warm, the way you'd steady someone in pain and not someone you'd conquered. He sagged against the wall with his eyes shut, breathing in ragged pulls, and he said, so quietly she almost missed it, "Thank you." A man who'd come to do harm, thanking the woman who'd stopped him, because she'd done it without ever once making him less than human. That was when Marge came back from her break and stopped dead at the mouth of the corridor, with her coffee going cold in her hand, taking in the whole impossible tableau, the extinguisher on the floor, the young man weeping at the counter, the doctor on the phone, and the new girl, 5th week, kneeling on the tile with a bound and broken man's hands, cradled under her own, calm as still water. "Simone," Marge said, just her name, a question and an amazement and something close to fear, all in 2 syllables. "He needs an IV and thiamine, and probably a sedative when the medics get here," Simone said, not looking up, her voice never changing. "His pulse is 130 and thready. He's been in withdrawal since this morning. Watch him for seizures." She said it the way you read off a report. Then, finally, she looked up at Marge, and for just a second the mask slipped, and Marge saw underneath it something old and tired and human, someone who had hoped never to have to be this good at this again. Delia's door opened a crack. The girl stood there in her hospital gown, one fist at her collar, staring at the wreck of the man she had run across a state to escape, sitting bound and weeping on the floor of the ward that had nearly failed her, would have failed her, but for one person. Her eyes went to Simone. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Simone gave her a small nod. The smallest thing, "It's over. You're all right." And Delia pressed her fist harder to her mouth and slid down her own doorframe and sat. And across the corridor, her daughter slept on in the nursery, 6 feet away, and never touched, never knowing, never to know. The police came the way Simone had made sure they would, walking not charging, because Priya had said the word contained. They found a scene already handled. A man secured with gauze and a fetal strap, medically stable, waiting to be taken to a hospital that would treat his withdrawal before a jail that would hold him for the rest of it. A follower crying at a counter with his empty hands flat on the surface, ready to tell them everything. And a night nurse in the 5th week of the quietest job she could find, sitting on the floor with her sleeves rolled past her elbows, who answered all their questions in short, true sentences and left out the only part that would have explained her. The footage from the corridor camera went up the chain fast, the way things do. By morning shift, everyone at Saint Alder had heard some version of it, and by the following night, everyone in Cape Marrow had. And within a week, it had climbed past Cape Marrow to places with cameras of their own. A young mother saved, a newborn 6 feet from a weapon, and a nurse who talked an armed man to the floor and tied his hands with a baby's heart monitor strap and never once raised her voice. Curtis Vane found her in the break room 4 days later. He had a different smile on now, a nervous, eager one, and a folder, and the news that a network television program wanted her, wanted the story, her face and her voice and her name, the hero night nurse, an interview that would air coast to coast. He said it like he was handing her a gift he had personally arranged. He did not mention the word paranoid. He seemed to be hoping very much that no one would remember he had ever said it, least of all her. Simone looked at the folder for a while without taking it. "You called it paranoid," she said finally. "Not angry, just even. The door. I stood in your office and I told you exactly what would happen, and you told the woman at the next desk I was paranoid. I heard you." Vane's smile flickered. "Simone, in hindsight, fix the door," she said. "That's what I want. Fix the door, fix the maglock timing, put a real check on the badge system, and do it this week. And I don't ever want to hear the word paranoid on this ward again, about anybody." She stood up. "That's the interview I'll give, to you, right now, in this room. And the television people, tell them no, thank them, and tell them no." He stared at her. "People would want to know who you are." And that was the thing, wasn't it? Simone had spent 2 years and 1 cross-country move and 5 quiet weeks trying to become someone who did not have to be that anymore. She thought of the cardboard tube at the bottom of her drawer, the citation face down, the thing she had earned and could not bear to hang because of what it meant she was. She was not going to put it on a screen and let a country's worth of strangers thank her for a skill she had prayed never to need again. No, they wouldn't, she said gently. They'd want the story. The story's fine. It just doesn't need my face on it. Say the staff, say a nurse. That's enough. She went back to work that night, and the night after that, and the older nurses watched her the way you watch weather, but differently now. With a quiet reverence they had the good grace never to say out loud. Marge started leaving a second cup of coffee at Simone's spot at the station without a word, and Simone drank it without a word, and that was the whole conversation. And it was plenty. Delia went home a few days later, to a new town none of them would know, with her daughter and a folder of her own, full of protective paperwork. Before she left, she came to find Simone on the night shift. She stood there holding the baby and opened her mouth to try to say the enormous thing she had come to say. And Simone just reached out and adjusted the blanket at the infant's neck, tucking it, the way she'd smoothed Delia's own blanket that first night. "You kept counting the exits," Simone said. "The first night, I saw you do it. You'd been right to be afraid before, hadn't you?" Delia's eyes filled. "How did you know that?" "Because I do it too," Simone said. And that was all she gave her. But it was the truest thing she'd said to anyone in 5 weeks. And Delia understood she had been seen by someone who knew the country she'd been living in. And she went out into her new life a little less alone for it. Garrett Nolan had come onto that ward as loud as a man can be, filling the whole corridor with his voice and his weapon, and his certainty that being the loudest made him the one in charge of what happened next. And he had ended the night the smallest thing on the floor, brought down not by anyone stronger and louder, but by a woman who never rose above a murmur, who had learned in the worst places on earth that the real thing steadies its hands and lowers its voice and does the hard thing gently, then goes back to work and lets someone else be thanked. It had taken Saint Alder 5 weeks to find that out. Simone had known it a long time. She never did frame the citation. But some weeks after that night, she took the cardboard tube out of the drawer and slid the paper out, and for the first time in 2 years, she read the whole thing through, standing at her window with the harbor fog making halos of the lamps. Then she rolled it up again and put it back, not face down this time, just away, ready, maybe, for a wall someday, when being who she was no longer felt like a wound. She thought that day might actually come now. That was new too. These stories are made with love. If this one stayed with you, subscribe to the channel, and I'll keep telling them. That is all I ask.